The Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 3, with Marty Garza. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent Podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent Podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau in Texas. And we are joined once again by our good buddy and friend of the show, Marty Garza. We're doing The Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 3. Finally, we're going to get to some of that stuff that he told us we were going to get to later. Marty, thank you for being back on the show, man.
Welcome.
I wouldn't count on it.
We're still not going to get to that stuff, folks.
We're inching our way forward. How you doing, guys?
I'm doing great,
good, brother.
Yeah, man.
Great to have you back.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Been looking forward to this one. As you know, this stuff's been in the works for a long time.
Yeah.
I was actually working on the stuff that's in this episode since before the last one. And I think with this one, it'll start to become a little more apparent why I had to lay out like this entire miniseries in advance, because there's a lot of like overlap between them. But it has, in order to maintain the chronology and all, everything had to be pre-planned. Yeah.
Well, I've gone through the document you sent. It's fantastic. I can't wait to get into it. But yeah, I think I can see where you're going. But I always think that, you send me the stuff, I'm like, I can see where he's going. And then the next one, I'm like, maybe I didn't know where he was going with the last one. But this is fantastic.
That's by design.
Yeah. Okay. It's by design. Well, it's really good. And yeah, I appreciate you obviously put tons of work into this, and it's great to present it on the show whenever you have it. So when do you think the next one will be ready? That's the next question.
It's all laid out,
yeah,
and some of it's written. It'll probably be another couple months or something.
Okay, yeah.
Got to space them out. This one, I would expect that the average listener will have to listen to this one a few times to grasp it all. There's a lot.
There's a lot of stuff.
Lot crammed in there. There for every sentence, there's probably 3 like interpretations. It seems like.
And difficult names. Are you purposefully looking for difficult names?
It's certain. You talk about certain time periods or certain geographical areas, and the names get weird.
Yeah, yeah, they do. All right, well, I think we should just start. The Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 3, by Marty Garza. And as always, we start with a quote. "The borders of the unknown are not situated 15 billion light years away. The borders of the unknown are situated within us, in our hearts, in our souls, in our eyes, and in our loves, as they are in the stars and inside the atom." Jacques Vallée. In Part 2 of this mini-series, we presented evidence that as early as mid-1947, elements within the U.S. military and intelligence communities appeared to be actively participating in the covert manipulation of public perception regarding UFOs and the paranormal. An expansive number of new governmental organizations and programs were spawned in a relatively short period of time, leading one to conclude that something must have occurred that accelerated such pursuits. At the top of the list of impetus was obviously the Cold War with the Soviet Union. However, seemingly never before had military conflict prompted such radical endeavors. That is, other than those pursued by one organization in particular, the Ahnenerbe in Nazi Germany. That's right? Ahnenerbe? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, making sure.
Ahnenerbe.
Ahnenerbe.
That's the way I've heard it.
Okay.
Yeah.
According to pioneering research author Gordon Thomas, when Dr. Sidney Gottlieb took over the CIA's new Office of Research and Development, it quickly became his flagship for even more bizarre and potentially far-reaching experiments in mind control. In the book Secrets and Lies, A History of CIA Mind Control, Thomas reports that Gottlieb persuaded DCI Richard Helms to fund a program known as Operation Often, of which he states, This operation was based on Dr. Ewan Cameron's earlier research into the supernatural. Operation Often was going to go further, exploring the world of black magic. In Dr. Gottlieb's mission statement, he stated the intention was to harness the forces of darkness and to challenge the concept that the inner reaches of the mind are beyond reach. The project would aim to create a new kind of psycho-civilized human being. Before World War II, Dr. Ewan Cameron was a professor of neurology and psychiatry at Albany State Medical School, where as early as 1938, he began conducting questionable experiments in human sensory deprivation. During the war, Cameron was recruited by the OSS and met regularly with Alan Dulles in the offices of the American Psychiatric Association in Washington. So the OSS is the
Office of what was it? Office of geez. I had my
Strategic
all my
Services
up.
or something like
yeah,
that?
Strategic Services. Yeah.
Okay.
I better pull that file up with all my
yeah,
acronyms.
all the acronyms. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so during the war, Cameron was recruited by the OSS and met regularly with Alan Dulles in the offices of the American Psychiatric Association in Washington. In 1943, Cameron moved to Canada and established the psychiatry department at McGill University while continuing to serve the OSS. Cameron is infamous for his development of highly controversial psychiatric procedures known as psychic driving and depatterning, in which an individual's psyche is penetrated and targeted memories are erased, and in some cases replaced, to modify the individual's conduct and or personality. In 1945, Dulles arranged for Cameron to be sent to Nuremberg, ostensibly to conduct a psychiatric evaluation of Nazi Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess in connection with the bizarre events of Operation Mistletoe, which was discussed in part 1 of this series, which involved a plot directed at Hess by Ian Fleming, Maxwell Knight, and the seemingly ever-present Aleister Crowley. However, author and historian John Simkin, who conducted an extensive investigation of the case, believes that in light of subsequent revelations, it is more likely that Cameron was deployed by Dulles to erase Hess's memory of the events which preceded his defection. We find this interesting given both the sensational nature of said events and the involvement of self-professed witch Sybil Leek in particular. Gordon Thomas reported that Operation Often soon had 3 full-time professional astrologers on its payroll, whose task was to predict the future. They sat for hours in soundproof booths in the safe house and read a wide selection of newspapers and magazines. They focused on items which psychically alerted them. They taped what came into their minds about how some particular event or happening would develop. But this was just the beginning. Thomas goes on to state that Operation Often was soon deep into demonology, and that as a result, an approach was made to the Monsignor in charge of exorcisms for the Catholic Archdiocese of New York, who flatly refused to cooperate. However, undismayed, the agency behaviorists approached Sybil Leek. As listeners will recall, Leek was a family friend of Aleister Crowley, who was a frequent visitor to her family home and encouraged her to pursue a career as a soon-to-be prolific author. One of her many books was titled Telepathy, the Respectable Phenomenon, which dealt with her experience with nonverbal thought transference and communication. According to author Annie Jacobson, while Leek was under contract with the CIA, she warned them that there is a great danger that within the next 10 years, the Soviets will be able to steal our top secrets by using out-of-the-body spies. In a discussion regarding Operation Often, distinguished U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and later CIA Station Chief in Lebanon, William F. Buckley, whose responsibility within the MK-Ultra program was to personally collect reports from its many subordinate laboratories and universities to present them directly to Gottlieb, conveyed to Gordon Thomas that at CIA headquarters he found himself surrounded by a mysterious and magical vortex in an agency that was supposed to deal in facts and make predictions based upon them. That corner of the CIA which Gottlieb had set aside for his work with the devil was an inner black hole from which came the constant cries of, "There is no God," and "The cosmic deity is all." Talk of Ouija boards, white witches, and chaos magic made the whole place sound like Halloween Forever. The more bizarre an idea was, the more Dr. Gottlieb was enthused about its possibilities. One was chaos magic, in which psychonauts offered to travel for the CIA into what they called the void, where existed the most powerful magic of all, able to destroy any enemy. Dr. Gottlieb had agreed to finance this particular journey into the unknown. But his enthusiasm did not end there. Thomas further reports that Dr. Gottlieb decided the devil must be made respectable. Working through conduits, he financed a course in sorcery at the University of South Carolina. 250 students enrolled for lessons devoted to fertility and initiation rites and raising the dead. Buckley was perplexed by what he witnessed, noting, "These people were intelligent. They understood, for instance, classical philosophy, but their sense of what was real was a chasm away from mine. I would start to get papers they had written to evaluate. They had titles like Cripple and Confuse Your Enemy with Satan and How a Pendulum Can Become a Secret Weapon in Locating Soviet Submarines." We will remind listeners that the latter, as discussed in Part 1, was a dowsing technique used by the Ahnenerbe in World War II. Buckley also informed Thomas that, according to Israeli intelligence, the terrorist organization Hezbollah was using doctors trained by the Soviets in mind control techniques. Regrettably, shortly after revealing this information while stationed in Lebanon, Buckley was abducted and tortured to death by members of Hezbollah. However, his seemingly outlandish claims were corroborated by author H.P. Albarelli in the book A Terrible Mistake, in which he reports that in an interview with TTS official Edward Bensinger, he stated, "For a while, it became pretty bizarre. We were looking into all sorts of strange matters, meetings with some pretty kooky characters, but a few were interesting. Scary, but interesting. I saw some demonstrations that were unbelievable. For some of us, the task was uncomfortable and crazy. We had little to no exposure to these sorts of things apart from Hollywood movies. It was unsettling, to say the least." Victor Marchetti, during his 14-year career with the CIA, served as a Soviet military specialist, the agency's leading expert on aid to third world countries, and as the special assistant to the director of the CIA, Richard Helms. He is also the highest-ranking official to ever become an outspoken critic of the organization. If the preceding information regarding Operation Often's objectives were not outrageous enough, Marchetti reported that psychic mediums were employed by the agency in an attempt to contact and obtain intelligence from deceased former agents, as well as an executed Soviet defector named Oleg Penkovsky. Marchetti also achieved a certain level of notoriety within ufological circles as a result of media articles with sensationalized headlines such as "Ex-CIA top agent claimed U.S. government hides proof of extraterrestrials' visit to Earth." This headline was extrapolated from the following quote made by Marchetti in 1979. Quote, "We have indeed been contacted, perhaps even visited, by extraterrestrial beings, and that the U.S. government, in collusion with other national powers of the Earth, is determined to keep this information from the general public. The purpose of the international conspiracy is to maintain a workable stability among the nations of the world and for them, in turn, to retain institutional control over their respective populations." End quote. Even notable personalities such as Joe Rogan have tweeted about the claim ascribed to Marchetti, and the quote has continually made its rounds on social media. Unfortunately, such headlines and the isolated quote are suggestive of Marchetti being some form of wild conspiracy theorist and do not accurately convey the context of his statement, which in many respects is far more significant. The quote was extrapolated from a single paragraph contained in a lengthy article written by Marchetti, published in the May 1979 edition of Second Look magazine. Titled, "How the CIA Views the UFO Phenomenon," the article provides readers with unique insight from a highly placed CIA insider, which, in our opinion, may afford us a useful perspective from which to better interpret current events regarding UFO disclosure. Unlike other alleged government insiders, Marchetti proved his dedication to the U.S. Constitution and the American people when he published the book CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. Despite the fact that 168 pages of the book were forcibly redacted by the agency, nonetheless, the information provided in the book served as the impetus for the Church Committee hearings and genuinely led to official disclosure of the MK Ultra program. In the Second Look article, Marchetti clearly states, "I do not know, from my own first-hand experience, if there are UFOs. I have never seen one, nor have I seen conclusive empirical or physical evidence that they really exist. But I do know that the CIA and U.S. government have been concerned over the UFO phenomenon for many years, and that their attempts, both past and recent, to discount the significance of the phenomenon and to explain away the apparent lack of official interest in it have all the earmarkings of a classic intelligence cover-up." It was this preamble that contextualized his actual statement, which is, "My theory is that we have indeed been contacted, perhaps even visited, by extraterrestrial beings." So they cut that first part out of his quote? Really?
And it depends on which article you read, but they definitely wanted to give the impression that he was making a
like a definitive statement. Yeah.
Right, rather than an opinion. But as I point out, first of all, I think the really important part of that quote that you just read is it sounds eerily familiar. It sounds very much like what we're hearing today. And he's saying as much as he can say without getting him or violating any sort of security oath. He's saying, I have not personally seen this.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. He's very careful in the way he writes the article.
Yeah.
He takes it right to the line, but then he pulls back a little bit. But he makes some really, really interesting observations as we'll see.
Yeah, well, I like this part where he's like, the government and the CIA have been concerned over this and their attempts to discount the significance of the phenomenon and explain away their apparent lack of official interest have the earmarkings of a classic cover-up. That's fantastic. And yeah, you're right. Yeah. It does sound similar to stuff we're hearing now. And this was in 1979 that he published this article. Okay. Okay, so his actual statement was, "My theory is that we have indeed been contacted." However, he then supports this theory with hypothetical scenarios based on historical precedents and insightful observations. For example, speculating on the likely chain of events following confirmation of the UFO reality, he states, "The CIA and U.S. government, aware that the phenomenon was of a worldwide nature, would seek cooperation in the investigation from the Earth's other technically advanced nations, such as the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and even the USSR. The CIA would function as the U.S. government's agent, just as the KGB would be the USSR's, MI6 would be the UK's, and so on. These agencies, in addition to specializing in secrecy and deceit, are quite accustomed to cooperating with each other on matters of mutual interest. Cooperation in the intelligence business is not restricted to allies. There are times when the CIA and KGB have found it advantageous to work together." Marchetti then supports this conjecture with fascinating historical precedent, emphasizing that both the CIA and KGB sometimes declare, i.e. identify, their officers to each other in order to facilitate the smooth functioning of clandestine intelligence activities. Even the famous U-2 program was conducted with mutual understanding until the Soviets shot down Francis Gary Powers. According to the chief of the CIA's clandestine services, it was an example of two hostile governments collaborating to keep operations secret from the general public of both nations. Therefore, although the public was led to believe that it was the revelation of covert overflights of the Soviet Union that sparked a major international conflict, it was actually the reneging upon an unspoken agreement by Khrushchev that was the crux of the matter behind the scenes. And the puppet show in the media was simply for public consumption. Marchetti,
Notice that what he's saying, the likely sequence of events following the revelation that there were some sort of visitation or, that the phenomenon was real, saying that there would be cooperation among various technologically advanced nations.
Yeah.
That's very similar to what we're hearing now about the Five Eyes Alliance.
Yeah, that's right.
That they're the Eyes Alliance, which is the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, are alleged to be the nations working together on the reverse engineering programs.
Canada? They're helping out, really?
Canada has a long history of that, going back to at least the 50s.
No way.
We'll get to that in the Patreon.
Okay. All right.
New twist.
Yes.
Okay. Where was I at here? No way. Canada. Okay. Okay. Marchetti later provides other similar insights, this time emphasizing indications of a genuine conspiracy. He states, ironically, among the vast body of circumstantial evidence pointing to the existence of UFOs or contacts from outer space, the Freedom of Information Act documents recently provided by the CIA have done more to make the public suspect there is an official conspiracy than any of the recent sightings or reports of encounters. In fact, the entire FOIA exercise has the same aroma of the agency's previous messy efforts to hide its involvement in drugs and mind control operations, both prime examples of a successful intelligence cover-up. The stratagem employed by the agency was, as it is known in the business, a limited hangout, i.e., admitting to a few past errors, then declaring the program has ended and, therefore, there is nothing else to tell. With that, all investigations come to a halt. Regardless of its shortcomings, the recently released CIA information does, however, tell us something, perhaps more than the government thinks. From the very beginning in 1947, the CIA closely monitored UFO reports on a worldwide basis. Although most of the FOIA's documents indicate only a routine interest in the problem, which is handled largely by the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, Foreign Documents Division, and the Domestic Contact Service, all innocuous, non-clandestine collection units. They also disclose, by inference, a standing requirement of the Directorate of Science and Technology for gathering UFO data. This, in turn, indicates other collection components, namely the clandestine services. The CIA's main directorate was tasked with providing information from all over the world on the UFO phenomenon. However, few such reports were released, and that implies a cover-up. Marchetti concisely summarizes all of this in one simple sentence. The real reason for such secrecy is, of course, to keep the public uninformed, misinformed, and therefore malleable. If anyone remains skeptical of the substance of such conclusions, H.P. Albarelli stressed that on December 10th, 1972, Richard Helms, which is Marchetti's boss, ordered Operation Often canceled. In a terse memo marked Read, Destroy, the CIA director offered Dr. Gottlieb no explanation. In January of 1973, Sidney Gottlieb resigned from the CIA, and no effort was made by Helms to persuade him to stay. Before his departure, and acting on Helms's order, Dr. Gottlieb shredded records of MK Ultra. As hard to believe as all these... What?
I was just going to point out that in case anybody's wondering why it was called Operation Often, Gottlieb said that when they started that program, the agents involved, he told them that very often they were very close to making breakthroughs in certain areas, and they would give up before they would accomplish it. They would, in other words, they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to do what was required to accomplish.
Yeah.
So that's why it was called Operation Off.
Because he had the fortitude to do it. That's why.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And or sometimes you got to call up the demons.
Yeah. Draw triangles in the desert. Yeah. Okay.
Not everybody has the guts to go out in the desert and draw.
As hard as to believe as all these allegations may sound, they do not appear to be inconsistent with the foundational principles of the organization. Director of the CIA, William Colby, noted that its founder, Frank Wisner, intentionally created an atmosphere of the Knights Templar within the organization. And author H.P. Arborelli also states that other CIA officials strove to perform work worthy of the Knights Templar. Consistent with this principle, as with the Ahnenerbe's research during World War II, Arborelli reports that documents reveal that the CIA, too, had a keen interest in the Ark of the Covenant, Solomon's Temple, and the peculiar apparatus reportedly witnessed by Ezekiel.
Like the wheels within wheels thing?
Yeah. Were you going to say something earlier? You had a joke?
We'll save it for the break.
Okay. During World War II, Dr. Vannevar Bush hand-selected a chemist named Dr. Stanley Lovell as the Director of Research and Development for the OSS. In this position, Lovell was tasked with developing out-of-the-box methods of addressing complex military challenges. As a chemist assigned to such responsibility, Lovell learned of and became greatly intrigued by the drug experiments performed by our recurring character, now affectionately known as Agent 666, Aleister Crowley. Shortly before Crowley's death in 1947, many of the functions of the OSS were transitioned into Crowley's into the newly established CIA. And according to author Richard Spence, a carryover was an interest in Crowley's experiments, specifically those involving hallucinogenic substances named Vedic soma, and one used by Native Americans referred to as Raziel's sapphire. This seemingly subtle detail warrants a bit of exploration. In Vedic tradition, soma is a ritualistic substance derived from a mysterious plant mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the Rig Veda, and the Puranas, as well as in Zoroastrianism as haoma, whose literal definition means to distill or extract. Soma was believed to grant immortality to those who partook of it. In the Vedas, Indra, the god of rain, lightning, sky, and clouds, who was the king of the Devas, a race of benevolent, shiny, heavenly, or divine beings, consumed large quantities of soma to obtain the power to defeat the serpent god Vritra. According to the Rig Veda, Vritra was the leader of the Asuras, a race of giant, power-hungry demons who held the waters of the world captive until Indra used his Vajra, a legendary weapon in the form of a thunderbolt, to kill Vritra and set the rivers free.
The first win for the electric universe.
Yeah. This is also, I think we've discussed this before, but it sounds like a, if you think of Vritra, was the leader of the Asuras, that these were a race of power-hungry demons who held the waters of the world captive. Mm-hmm. The idea that these were the glaciers in the mountains, right? Yeah. And then the Vajra is the comet, the impact, the thing from the sky, from heaven that came down and destroyed the glaciers and let the water free and the rivers.
And, what happens when the glaciers are destroyed?
Sets the rivers free, the oceans rise, and then there's water again. Yeah.
Right. There's flooding, maybe?
Yeah, maybe there's some flooding. Could be. Yeah.
Did you notice also in the representation, notice that Indra is covered in eyes?
Oh, yeah. Look at that. They always have too many arms. I don't understand. Okay. According to Vedic legend, Soma was closely guarded in heaven, but was stolen by a falcon, who brought it down to Manu and mankind. The Rig Veda contains a poem that proclaims that those who drank of it pronounced, "We have drunk the Soma, we have become immortal. We have gone to the light, we have found the gods." It is worth noting that in Egyptian mythology, the falcon represents Horus, the god of kingship, the sun, and the sky, who was the consort of Hathor. Crowley referred to our current epoch as the Eon of Horus, a period of self-realization. In his book, The Heart of the Master, he elucidates. So, when the time was ripe, appeared the brethren of the formula of Osiris, whose word is IAO, so that men worshipped man, thinking him subject to death, and his victory dependent upon resurrection. Even so conceived they of the Son as slain and reborn with every day and every year. Now this great formula being fulfilled and turned into abomination, this lion came forth to proclaim the Aeon of Horus, the crowned and conquering child who dieth not, nor is reborn, but goeth radiant ever upon his way. Even so goeth the sun, for as it is now known that night is but the shadow of the earth, so death is but the shadow of the body that veileth his light from its bearer. As noted, another ritualistic substance employed by Crowley was one known as Raziel's sapphire. Interestingly, the name of this substance is a reference to the Sefer Raziel, which, according to Hebrew legend, is said to be the first book ever written, which was inscribed upon sapphire and given to Adam by the archangel Raziel. Raziel is known as the Angel of Secrets because he is said to be the one who hears behind the curtain what is decreed to be, and he proclaims it to the world, or in the world. In Kabbalah, Raziel is one of 10 archangels in the Briatic world, which is the second of the 4 worlds of creation. He represents wisdom and is the leader of the Erelim, a class of angels most often associated with circumstances of death and tragedy.
Notice that, hang on just a second there.
Okay.
Notice that Raziel hears from behind the curtain,
Yeah.
and proclaims it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's awfully reminiscent of Enki learning that of Enlil's plan to flood the world and warning Utnapishtim through the reed wall.
Talking to the wall, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But he also seems to be, he is like the angel of disclosure, right? It's
Exactly.
We need this guy. Okay.
Well, we're up on a break.
Break time.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, 0 mistakes, 0 technical difficulties.
Not one.
All handled flawlessly, even though they don't exist. Yeah, I hope I got that fixed. So let's get back into the material here.
Yeah.
Now that I can pay attention.
All right. So you missed the entire first segment.
I picked up some bits, but yeah, I was distracted quite a bit.
All right. Well, we were discussing Vedic legend. So where was I exactly here? I thought I had this. Okay, here it is. So in Kabbalah, Raziel is one of 10 archangels in the Briatic world, which is the second of the 4 worlds of creation. He represents wisdom and is the leader of the Erelim, a class of angels most often associated with circumstances of death and tragedy. It is believed that when Adam and his descendants were cast out of the Garden of Eden, he was continually visited by Archangel Michael and others to instruct and console him. It was then that Raziel presented Adam with a book of secrets prepared in heaven by the Lord, containing 72 branches of wisdom and 1,500 keys, many of which were wholly unknown even to the angels. As Adam held the book up to his eyes, a burning flame inside the sapphire took the form of letters, and as he studied the pages, angels assembled around him to learn of its divine wisdom. This did not sit well with the angels, who then made a plea to the Lord, stating, "Impart the mystery of your glory to the angels, not to men." In the Zohar, the angel Hadraniel, the guardian of the second gate of heaven, warns Adam, "Guard thou well and wisely the great and glorious gift entrusted to thee by the Lord. To none of the angels on high have its secrets ever been revealed and imparted, save to thyself. Be thou therefore discreet, and refrain from making them known to others." This narrative also appears to be supported in the Book of Enoch, which states that when Enoch was sent by the fallen angels to intercede for them and ask the Lord for forgiveness, he was told to relay the following response. "You have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you, and you knew worthless ones, and these in the hardness of your hearts you have made known to the women, and through these mysteries women and men work much evil on earth." Contained on the pages of the Sefer Raziel was said to be the knowledge of the spiritual laws of nature, the planets, stars, and all creation. It also contained wisdom concerning the power of speech and thought, as well as the soul within the confines of physical existence. The book also contained the entire history, past, present, and future, of mankind. The Sefer Raziel was passed down through many generations as Adam handed it down to his son Seth, who passed it down to Enosh, Kenan, Mahaliel, and then Jared. It was at that point in history when the Irin Kadishin, the Holy Watchers, descended onto earth to take wives. Jared fathered a son at the age of 162, who he named Enoch. Before he died at the age of 962, Jared handed the Sefer Raziel to Enoch, from which he learned much of his vast knowledge of the mysteries of creation contained in the Book of Enoch. Before Enoch was taken by God at the age of 365 and transformed into the angel Metatron, he passed down the Sefer Raziel to his son Methuselah, who later gave it to his son Lamech, who then presented it to his son. In the book Tree of Souls, author Howard Schwartz describes how Lamech's son intently studied the book, learning great secrets of knowledge, hierarchies of understanding, and ideas of wisdom, to know the way of life and the way of death, the way of good and the way of evil, and to foresee the concerns of each and every year, whether for peace or for war, for plenty or for hunger, for harvest or for drought. By gazing there, the destinies of the stars were revealed, as well as the course of the sun and the names of the guardians of each and every firmament. Revealed as well were the secrets of how to interpret dreams and visions, and how to rule over all of a man's desires, as well as how to drive away evil spirits and demons. From the book, he also learned of a great flood to come, and how to construct an ark in which to survive. Of this, social anthropologist J.G. Fraser wrote, "Noah enclosed the book in a golden casket when he took it with him into the ark, where it served him as a timepiece to distinguish night from day. For so long as the flood prevailed, neither the sun nor the moon shed any light on the earth." This sounds familiar.
Yeah, that Noah obtaining wisdom from the Sefer Raziel is similar to Unapistum learning of the Great Flood from Enki.
Yeah, and this artifact, right? Ahura Mazda gets what was the guy's name?
Vishnu?
Vishnu? No.
No.
I can't remember but in the Zoroastrian tradition, when they're building the Varas, he does the same thing. He gives them something to light the place because they have no day or night down there. And in the Manu tradition of the flood with the giant fish, it was the same thing. He had something that would tell him day or night. It was a crystal or something like that. Okay. After the flood, the book was passed down to Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Joseph, who was buried with it. However, it was preserved when his coffin was raised by Moses from the Nile and carried beside the tabernacle throughout the journey of the Israelites through the desert. According to the Torah of Moses, God sent Metatron, the angel of countenance or presence, which may be interpreted as face or physicality, to bring Moses before his throne in heaven. When Metatron appeared before Moses, he stated, "I am Enoch, the son of Jared, thy father's father. The Almighty hath sent me to bring thee up to his throne of glory." Terrified by this encounter, Moses replied, "I am only flesh and blood, and cannot look upon the angels." To carry out his instruction, Metatron changed Moses' tongue into a tongue of fire, and his eyes he made like the wheels of the heavenly chariot, and his power like unto that of the angels. In this way was Moses carried up to heaven. Upon arriving at the first heaven, Moses noted that this heaven was full of windows, and at each window stood an angel. He was then taken by Metatron to a series of heavens, each containing thousands of angels of different forms and proportions. On a subsequent visit aboard a cloud, a heaven above Mount Sinai, Moses was confronted by the angel Hadraniel, who asked what business he had there. Moses was terrified by his appearance and said that with every word uttered by Hadraniel, 12,000 bolts of fire came from his mouth at once. Moses, with his eyes dripping tears, wanted to descend from the cloud, but then the Lord appeared and rebuked Hadraniel, stating, "From the day I created the angels, you have all been an opponent of the humans. In the beginning, when I wanted to create Adam the first, all of you made their prosecution before me, and you all said to me, 'What is man that you are mindful of him?'" Here again, we are given a sense of acrimony on behalf of certain factions of angels concerning mankind. Be that as it may, Hadraniel repented and stated, "I did not know that Moses came with your permission. Now I shall be his emissary and go before him as a student before his teacher." At once, Hadraniel ran and lowered himself before Moses until they arrived at Sandalphon's fire. Sandalphon.
Yeah.
Sandalphon, an ophonym, sometimes identified as the angelic ruler of the Asya, the material world, was the ominous flaming eye-encrusted mandala of wheels within wheels that escorted the Merkaba, or divine chariot, witnessed by Ezekiel. This was also presumably the apparatus that so intrigued the CIA, as mentioned previously. Quoting from the Talmud in Above Sinai, Dr. Samuel J. Kessler states that upon encountering Sandalphon, Hadraniel said to Moses, "You must return, for I am not able to protect myself before Sandalphon's fire, that it should not burn me." When Moses saw Sandalphon, he was immediately startled and hastened to go down from the cloud, and his eyes were dripping tears, and he asked for mercy before the Holy One. And he answered him. Out of his great fondness for Israel, the Holy One himself descended from his throne of glory and stood before Moses until he passed from Sandalphon's fire. About that time it was written in the Torah, and Yahweh passed before him. This passage could easily lead us down another enormous rabbit hole with the potential to fill an entire episode. However, that is for another day. Completing the exploration at hand in a similar fashion to that of Hadraniel, in the Beit HaMidrash, Raziel also shields the Hayat, a class of angels, from Sandalphon. Of greater potential significance is this passage from the Aramaic Targum to Ecclesiastes, which warns, "Do not curse the king even in your thoughts in the secret places of your heart, and do not curse the sage in your bedroom, for the angel Raziel proclaims every day from heaven upon Mount Horeb, and a voice goes through the whole world, and Sandalphon the high priest flying through the air of heaven like an eagle with wings, and declares matters that are done in secret to all the dwellers of the earth."
There's a lot to unpack in all of that.
Sounds like a surveillance state right there.
Well, Mount Horeb. Mount Horeb's where Moses received the 10 Commandments. And some scholars believe that Mount Sinai and Horeb are twin peaks of the same mountain. And the etymology of Horeb is glowing heat or sun, and the etymology of Sinai is Sin, the Mesopotamian deity for the moon.
Yeah.
So Horeb and Sinai would represent the sun and the moon.
The sun and the moon.
Yeah. And then who is the sage in your bedroom? There's that same Sandalphon declares matters to the world, just as Ezekiel hears a voice. Oh,
I see. Okay, I thought it was like in the context, do not curse the king even in your thoughts or the secret places of your heart, and do not curse the sage in your bedroom. That what they're saying is don't curse the king in your mind, don't curse the sage in the privacy of your bedroom. That's what I think they're saying. Yeah. Because this guy sees all and then he proclaims it to everyone. In other words, it's like you're being watched.
There are no secrets.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And also notice, or it's backing up a little bit, but like when Metatron appears to Moses to take him up to one of the 9 heavens, Moses says he can't because he's physical, right? He's just a man.
Yeah.
And Metatron changes his tongue into a tongue of fire.
Right.
And his eyes to like wheels of the heavenly chariot. I think that suggests that he was not taken in physical form, or he was transformed into something else.
Right. Yeah.
Or it's the spacesuit. You know what I mean?
Well, the next passage adds to this.
Here,
mystery.
take this laser gun and this helmet.
Yeah. What was the other thing I was looking at in here? This idea of this book.
Oh yeah, that's
the Sefer Reziel or whatever. Made of sapphire, right? It sounds like magic or like technology, depending on how you want to look at it. Where it's basically some kind of stone, but when he looks at it with the light shining through it, he can see data. It transforms into words in his mind, right? And then it contains all the secrets of everything, of all of creation. And then the angels are annoyed because they haven't even been told this stuff. Right? So that is strange in the context of the idea of the Watchers coming down and giving man like forbidden
Technology.
knowledge. Yeah.
Right.
And but it's addressed in there, like that Enoch says in the Book of Enoch or whatever. It says that they told them, well, the knowledge you're giving men is crap.
Is the useless ones,
Yeah, it's the useless stuff. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, you've given it to man, and now they're using it to do bad things.
Another interpretation of that Sefer Raziel could be, maybe I'll say that later. Maybe we need to put a little bit more in this. It may not make sense yet. Like I already know some of the stuff that's coming.
Yeah.
So it'll make sense. And maybe right now it's too abstract to see. We haven't been presented with enough information to lead to maybe that interpretation. But it may be somewhat metaphorical, I guess, would be maybe look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. Well,
I wonder if they're still doing this with the technology, though, right? Like they're still sort of trickling out the crap tech.
Oh yeah.
To like send our civilization in a certain direction, and they're like saving the really good stuff.
Well, okay.
Which is interesting because the idea of this legend is that somebody tried to give all of it, like including all the good stuff, to Adam right at the very beginning, right? And people had a problem with that, but then this is passed down to all these people who lived a long time, all the way down to, Noah gets it, uses it for light in the ark. Mm-hmm. It's buried with one of Noah's sons or grandsons, and then Moses digs it up out of the Nile, right?
So what is the source for this this information?
These are
various
Hebrew legends.
These are all, I
the
pulled
legends
up
of the Jews?
The Torah and a few different, the Ben Had Midrash and a few, there's several documents. They overlap. They're telling the same, it's pretty consistent throughout these different.
I've read a lot, like on sacred text, sacred-text.com or whatever. They have all
I've got some of them. I actually have the passage that I can give you the actual numbers to look them up, because they're direct quotes. So obviously they're translations, and there are multiple. I had to look through different translations to see which ones the most consistent, because some are maybe slightly different than others. But I don't want to skip over what you just said. You said something very important here. You actually said something that clicked with me instantly the second you said it. I don't even know you realized it when you said, "Are they still doing that?"
Yeah. The
This
gifting fields.
junk,
Yeah.
right. What if, following that train of thought, right? What if the useless ones are the nuts and bolts?
Oh yeah. That's the useless stuff. Because like this
Yeah.
book, that's the other thing is that, when you read about, you're reading in here about what it's like, okay, the laws, nature, planets, stars, all of creation, wisdom concerning the power of speech and thought, soul within the confines of physical existence, that's an interesting idea, what the soul is in the confines. But then it also says it contains the entire history, past, present, and future of mankind. So that implies that Adam sat down and read this book and saw the entire future of the human race. And he was probably like, this book sucks.
That lends to the metaphor that I was talking about, right? I don't like the way this book ends.
Yeah, this is a terrible book.
What a downer. Oh, I saw that coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's...
Final chapter. TikTok. Dang it.
I mean, when you read it, like I go back and forth between, am I looking at a technology, or is this more along the lines of these are all symbols for something else entirely, right? Which is,
I interpret it as a metaphor.
Yeah.
For another, well, I guess you could look at it like something like the Akashic records.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like all
knowledge.
Yes, and it's like, okay, it's the Book of Secrets. It has 72 chapters or whatever, branches of wisdom in it, right? And so you see this number, and then you're like, okay, to me that's a flag saying, here's some esoteric stuff. Don't take this literally, right? Right off the bat. But that means that all of the elements of the story have meaning if you knew the code, if you know the language of birds or whatever it is you want to call it. What is this? The idea that it's in a sapphire, right? That it's...
Didn't it say something about it had a bunch of keys?
Yes. 72 branches of wisdom and 1,500 keys.
1,500 keys.
You'll get it in a minute.
How many pyramids are there?
All right, where was I?
I know where you are, but let me just give you this sentence to pick up from.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And the idea of the book passing down is like, it's just like, is that just the father teaching the son the same knowledge? Right.
Right.
But then it's preserved in a coffin. That is a little different.
Okay. The last paragraph that you read was where the of greater potential significance is the passage.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Aramaic term.
That's right. Do not curse the king. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so this appears to correlate with Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 25 through 26, which states, "And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads where they stood, and they had let down their wings. And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne as the appearance of a sapphire stone." We'll conclude this exploration with what we find to be arguably the most potentially ominous detail. Moses later passed the Sefer Reziel to Aaron, who presented it to Phinehas, eventually making its way to Solomon, who would go on to become king. Solomon used the book's wisdom to construct the temple and to bind demons, and in this regard he stated, "I named the most holy name of the Lord, Yahweh, and I merited the means that may not be named, the means of the wisdom which the angel Raziel showed me in a dream, whereof the close tale may not be told to the understanding, and said to me, Hide well the secrets of secrets, because the time comes when the universal sciences will be destroyed, and utterly hidden, and will become void, and know that thy time is near. So what do you think is what do you think is the significance of that? Is he saying that this knowledge that has been imparted to humans will be destroyed at some point? Is that what you think it's saying? Or is he saying the sciences themselves?
It sounds to me like he's saying that whatever the laws of nature or how...
Is it saying the sciences themselves are going to be destroyed?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Unfortunately, look, I take a more apocalyptic view of that. Yeah. And it's saying that when science reaches a point of hubris, you'll learn that all of that was wrong and none of it matters. I know that your time is near. Okay, what a downer. I said it was ominous.
Is there hubris in science?
Oh, geez, what do you think?
I mean, are you talking about scientists or science itself? Like
scientists.
Yeah. Yeah, because I do have...
When the universal sciences will be destroyed and utterly hidden.
Right.
Universal sciences.
Yeah, universal science is like, it sounds like another way of saying like the laws of how everything works, right?
Right.
So it's like
let's say
about the end of the world, the end of the universe.
Right, a breakthrough on a new paradigm. All of a sudden, new physics, or all the physics you thought you knew, all the laws you thought were written in stone, are now null and void.
Well, okay,
a whole new.
Yeah, but it seems like in the context of what's happening here, that I think it's like Solomon is telling him, or Solomon is saying that Raziel said, keep these secrets secret, because eventually all of this information that is contained in here that right now are true, it will be destroyed. Yeah. Right? And it sounds like the end.
Keep it secret to preserve it.
Right. It sounds like the end of creation is what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, even in when Harndal warns Adam the same thing. He suggests to Adam that there's danger in the knowledge that's contained in the book.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
I mean, this could be this is a stretch, but I'm just thinking about the idea that the universe, or just the way nature is itself, it's secret. It's not easy to figure things out. They're hidden.
Yeah.
How things actually work, how physics works, what the forces are, how they interact with one another it's secret. Like, and it's, you see what I'm saying? Like, nobody's hiding it, but the universe itself it's hidden. So it's like, that's what I'm trying to say.
That's very synchronistic to the underlying point in all of this, but yes.
So yeah, but I'm just talking about.
I guess it depends on whether you correlate science, the universal sciences, with secrets, the secret of secrets, because he says, hide well the secret of secrets, because the time comes when the universal sciences will be destroyed and utterly hidden and will become void.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, my interpretation is those are two different things. The secret of secrets is something altogether different than the universal sciences, which will be destroyed, because it doesn't seem like the secret of secrets would be destroyed.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the real secret, or the fundamental nature of reality.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about this book of secrets.
Yeah. Well, and Solomon's being real cagey here too. He's like, I merited the means that may not be named. Right? The means of this wisdom. Whereof the close tale may not be told to the understanding, right? That's right. The other thing. He's like, I can't tell this to people who understand stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he's saying it's not understandable, period.
Yeah.
It cannot be told to the understanding.
Yeah. Maybe that is what he's saying. I took it to mean he was saying, the understanding are people who study, what he would consider to be learned men. In other words, he has to keep these secrets. He can't even talk to other learned men about it. But yeah, maybe you're right. It's just a strange statement.
Yeah. Whereof the close tale may not be told to the understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the way it's written, it is open to interpretation.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's by design.
Yeah.
And it says, and I was merited the means that may not be named.
Right. He's
the
being
means
real
of the
cagey.
wisdom by which the angel Raziel showed me in a dream.
Yeah. Like he can't even give name to it, whatever it is that he can do.
Right. Now, is that suggesting that Raziel is still communicating with he's communicating with Solomon?
Yeah. Comes to him in a dream,
So-
he says. Or a vision. Doesn't have to be while sleeping. Okay. We're getting close to a break, but we can move. We can go.
Yeah,
forward.
well, we're about to shift gears here, so this would be a good break point.
Yeah, we can take a break. We can take a break.
All right.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Second half of the show. This is the Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 3 by Marty Garza here on Snake Bros. And this is really interesting stuff. It's definitely Snake Bros territory. I love all the mythology. But I think we're going to shift gears here a bit, right, Marty?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So on June 16th, 1954.
Are we shifting beers?
Let's shift some beers also. Yes. While on base at Edgewood Arsenal, Andrea Puharich received a phone call from Alice Bouvier, who, as listeners will recall, was the wealthy heiress of John Jacob Astor IV, Tesla's benefactor who perished in the sinking of the Titanic. She called to inform Puharich of an episode that she and her friend Betty witnessed in her home in New York City involving a sculptor named Harry Stump. Born in 1923, Hendrikus, or Harry Stump, was a shy young man who had only recently moved to the United States, having grown up in Holland, where he attended art school and attained reasonable success as a sculptor. As a child, Harry was unusually introverted and claimed to have invisible playmates as well as a companion in the form of a spirit of an elderly or kind elderly man with whom he occasionally conversed. One day, while at the age of 6, Harry approached his mother to tell her that her sister, his favorite aunt, was dying in a hospital. His mother was mortified by this obvious fabrication, and Harry was punished for uttering such an aberrant thought. 6 hours later, she received a telephone call informing her that her sister had been hit by a car and died while being treated in a hospital. Other similar episodes of apparent foreknowledge followed. So as devout Christians, Harry's parents sent him to their parish priest, who instilled in him the belief that these were acts of evil and warned him not to be seduced by such obvious work of the devil. This was an enormous source of embarrassment to both Harry and his family. As such, he was very ashamed to speak of this ability and wished it would just go away. When he finally moved to the United States to advance his art career, he hoped to put the entire chapter behind him and never speak of it again. As an art collector, Alice Bouvier met this promising young sculptor at a party and invited him to her home for dinner and to view her collection. That evening, Alice was showing Harry her art pieces when she handed him a golden pendant, once owned by Queen Tiye. Or is that Tai? I don't know. T?
Yeah.
Who was queen from 1398 to 1338 BC, wife of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. And it was gifted to her by Sir Wallace Budge of the British Museum in London. So it was gifted to Alice, right?
Yes.
When she placed the pendant in Harry's hand, he began convulsing and fell into a chair in what appeared to be a form of a trance. He then began speaking in an unfamiliar voice, devoid of his normal Dutch accent, some of which was verbalized in a language unknown to her. In response to his gestures, Alice handed him a notepad and pencil, and Harry began sketching what appeared to be Egyptian hieroglyphs. Alice described other details of the episode, stating, "He started to tell me about some drug that would stimulate one's psychic faculties." When he awoke from the trance, he claimed to have no recollection of what had transpired. Alice indicated that careful notes were taken, documenting the incident, which Puharich requested to be sent to him, including the drawings made by Harry. Upon inspection of the transcript, Puharich's attention was particularly drawn to the following utterance. "Medicine, light yellow, in that jar of dried wood. It is a powder, very little, in my finger. Let it fall on that fluid and it turns red, deep red. There is a cream to take people out of themselves when they couldn't bear their pain. The same way, be very careful, as a plant I see here. It grows here and works the same way. I don't know how, but I can draw it. There are big ones like this. The spots are white, the plant is yellow. Take the skin off of its neck, and the white spots too, they will work the same way. The ointment is to be rubbed in the skull, on the joints, for trance. If the dose is too much, you can get in trance and may never wake up. You are so changed in body that you can't get back. Be very careful. Start out with very little and work up. Find what you can stand." Accompanying this statement was a drawing of what appeared to be a type of mushroom. The apparent suggestion was its ability to detach one's consciousness from the body, which greatly intrigued Puharich and sent him on a mission to decipher the accompanying hieroglyphs and attempt to somehow verify the information. The concept of detaching one's psyche from their body, enabling one to psychically travel vast distances to gather knowledge, was not a new one. In the book The Greeks and the Irrational, published in 1951, author E.R. Dodds discusses one of the earliest known shamans, stating, "Out of the north came Abaris, riding, it was said, upon an arrow, as souls, it appears, still do in Siberia. So advanced was he in the art of fasting that he had learned to dispense altogether with human food. He banished pestilences, predicted earthquakes, composed religious poems, and taught the worship of his northern god, whom the Greeks called the Hyperborean Apollo. In part 1, we discussed the Hyperboreans described by Homer, Plato, Strabo, Cicero, Ptolemy, Pliny, and many other historians who wrote of this ancient race that was said to have existed in the Arctic region of Northeast Asia, who were ruled by 8 to 10 foot tall giants. The Greek philosopher Iamblichus attested to the Hyperborean Abaris's renowned supernatural abilities and to the curious magical arrow given to him by Apollo so that he may travel the world upon it to collect gold for the temple. Iamblichus stated, 10,000 other more divine and more admirable particulars likewise are uniformly and unanimously related of the man, such as infallible predictions of earthquakes, rapid expulsion of pestilence and violent winds, instantaneous cessations of the effusion of hail, and a tranquilization of the waves of rivers and seas, in order that his disciples might easily pass over them. Abaris the Hyperborean, receiving the power of performing certain miracles of this kind in many places. His deeds, however, are manifest, to which we may add that Abaris was a walker on air, because being carried on the arrow, which was given to him by the Hyperborean Apollo, he passed over rivers and seas and inaccessible places like one walking on air. It was written that Apollo's miraculous arrow was eventually buried in the Hyperborean mountains. This is an interesting detail given Yakov Blomkin's alleged discovery of weapons of the gods within a mountain in Tibet, discussed in part 1. I don't know, the arrow sounds like a ship, right?
Went over mountains and areas that were impassable.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. A sky ship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a craft, a spacecraft or something.
Yeah, a craft. Mm-hmm. But I guess you could call it a weapon. But yeah, it sounds like a means of conveyance. Iamblichus also wrote of Abaris's introduction to Pythagoras, who was also said to possess similar divinatory abilities, and who confided in Abaris his true divine nature. Lambicus wrote that to prove this to Abaris, Pythagoras described to him several details of his distant Hyperborean temple as proof of deserving being considered divine. Pythagoras also added that he came into the regions of mortality to remedy and improve the condition of the human race, having assumed human form lest men disturbed by the novelty of his transcendency should avoid the discipline he advised. So here again we have the idea that some kind of transcendence changes the way that they look. And so Pythagoras has to assume the human form. He advises Abaris to stay with him, to aid him in correcting the manners and morals of those they might meet. So Abaris stayed with him and was compendiously taught physiology and theology, and instead of living by the entrails of beasts, he revealed to him the art of prognosticating by numbers, conceiving this to be a method purer, more divine, and more kindred to the celestial numbers of the gods. Dodds believed that the Greeks learned these divinatory abilities from the ancient shamanistic traditions of Arctic Siberian tribes, such as the Yakuts, Samoyeds, and Tungus. He wrote of several others said to possess such abilities. He wrote, "Into the north, at the bidding of the same Apollo, went Aristeas, a Greek from the Sea of Marmora, and returned to tell his strange experiences in a poem that may have been modeled on the psychic excursions of northern shamans. Tradition further credited him with the shamanistic powers of trance and bilocation. His soul, in the form of a bird, could leave his body at will. He died or fell entranced at home, yet was seen at Cyzicus. Many years later he appeared again at Metapontum in the far west. The same gift was possessed by another Asiatic Greek, Hermontimus of Clazomenae, whose soul traveled far and wide, observing events in distant places while his body lay inanimate at home. Such tales of disappearing and reappearing shamans were sufficiently familiar at Athens for Sophocles to refer to them in the Electra without any need to mention names." So what the implication there is that these people who appeared and disappeared were so familiar to the people of Athens that this guy didn't even have to say who they were. He's just like, yeah, you know those guys.
They were common.
Yeah.
Right. Shout out to our own resident shaman. Ash.
Yeah. Can he bilocate? Dodds also provided us with a description of the shaman's ability of passing at will into a state of mental dissociation. In that condition, he is not thought to be possessed by an alien spirit, but his own soul is thought to leave its body and to travel to distant parts, most often to the spirit world. A shaman may in fact be seen simultaneously in different places. He has the power of bilocation. From these experiences, narrated by him in extempore song, he derives the skill in divination, religious poetry, and magical medicine, which makes him socially important. He becomes the repository of a supernormal wisdom. As intriguing as the information conveyed by Harry appeared to be, Puharich found himself in a position where he must somehow determine its authenticity. Knowing nothing of the Egyptian language nor hieroglyphics, he reached out to an expert in the field. However, when the expert asked how the data had been obtained, Puharich reluctantly admitted that it was channeled information. This was not only met with extreme skepticism, but the expert insisted that he could not be associated with such matters. It was only after a series of assurances of anonymity that he agreed to superficially review the material. Puharich later published a full account of the sequence of events, which included the original transcript, drawings, and translations. But in short, the expert concluded that much of the information provided by Harry was available in the public domain through books and in museums. However, there were a few details that the expert noted were highly obscure, ultimately acknowledging, "This is rather interesting, and I think I will have to revise my opinion about this being telepathy, because whoever wrote this certainly knew the archaic form of the Egyptian language. Perhaps you had better investigate the background of this sculptor and find out if he himself is not somewhat of an expert in this language." If the information obtained through Harry was authentic, the most interesting aspect for Puharich was the following segment of the excerpt's transcription. "It is Tehuti, the god of writing and mathematics of the Egyptians, who is speaking. And if I am correct in my interpretation, Tehuti wants to make some sort of announcement of what he calls the plant of life, and which may be further described by the phrase plant with a red crown. I might say that in almost all the ancient cultures, the Chinese, the Indian, the Sumerian, the Babylonian, the Syrian, and the Egyptian, there is reference to the so-called tree of life, or as the Chinese call it, the plant of immortality. It seems there was a belief in ancient times that there was some sort of plant which bestowed the gift of immortality on him who should partake of its fruits. In addition to references in both Genesis and the Book of Revelation to a tree of life placed in the Garden of Eden, this is also rather reminiscent of the story of Inanna, the Sumerian queen of heaven, goddess of love, war, and fertility, who plucked the hulupu tree planted by Enki from the banks of the Euphrates and carried it to Uruk, where she planted it in her holy garden. Likewise, the mother goddess Hathor was also associated with the Egyptian tree of life and was known as the Lady of the Sycamore, often depicted emerging from the branches of the tree, symbolizing the connection between heaven and earth and in association with the medicinal healing power of its figs. In the book Mythology of All Races, published in 1927, Dr. Uno Holmberg describes in great detail the creation stories of the Siberian peoples, which similarly make ubiquitous references to a tree of life. The Altai wrote of a giant silver fir, which raises its crown to the dwelling of Bai Yilgon, their most grand god. A Scandinavian poem states, "In the center of the earth there is an iron mountain, and on this mountain a white, seven-branched birch." Holmberg states that, according to the Yakut, this life-giving tree is the dwelling place of the first man, who upon appeared upon the earth, wished to know why he had been created. He approached this giant tree, and along the branches of which a light-colored liquid flows, bringing blessedness to the one tasting it, and saw an opening appear in the trunk, from which a female, visible only to the waist, informed him that his father, the heaven god Ar-Tohan, the High Lord, and his mother, Kibai Kotun, or Kibai Mistress, immediately after his birth, lowered him from the third heaven to the earth so that he might become the forefather of the human race. Here again we find a curious association between the concepts of a tree of life and a maternal spirit. Holmberg provides further description of the latter, stating, "This spirit of the tree is described by the tale as a grave-eyed, middle-aged woman with flowing locks and naked bosom. This description is oddly reminiscent of that mentioned in Brothers of the Serpent, episode 213, A History of Unlikely Coincidences, Part 1, regarding the alleged apparition of the self-described daughter of Fortitude, presumably Inanna, during one of Dr. John Dee's scrying sessions in 1587. Holmberg also recounts the following curious description by the Yakuts of the settings surrounding the first man. His dwelling is in the center of the plain and has 4 silver-gleaming corners, 40 windows, 50 pillars, and 30 roof trees. The walls and the golden floor are fourfold, and the silver roof threefold. Although this dwelling would therefore seem to have possessed 7 stories, the tree of life itself is described in the following words. When he comes out of his dwelling onto the balcony towards the east to see the landscape, he has before him the king of trees, which grows among the grass. This tree over which swings the blue air is so old that its age cannot be reckoned in centuries. Its roots stretch through Hades, and its crown pierces the 9 heavens. This is situated above the wide, motionless depths, below the 7 stories, the 9 discs of heaven, in the central place, on the navel of the earth, in the quietest place, where the moon does not decline, nor the sun sink."
9 discs of heaven
Yeah.
where the sun doesn't sink.
That sounds like it's in space.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And
Solar
it has
system.
windows and 7 stories.
Yeah.
And notice it has windows just like,
The first heaven that
was
Moses
it-
went to.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And he saw an angel standing in each window.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. The 9 discs of heaven in the central place where the moon does not decline and the sun sink is like a description of the solar system
From space, yeah.
from space. Yeah. But in the central place, Is that on the earth or in the sun?
I don't know.
Is the navel of the earth not on the earth?
I don't know.
Yeah. Of the tree, he further states, the crown of the tree rose over the 7 stories of heaven, being the tethering post of the overgod. Ooh, I'm not even going to try that. An overgod. And its roots went deep down into the underground depths, where they were the dwelling pillars of the strange mythical beings there. By means of its leaves, the tree talked with the dwellers in heaven. These descriptions are astonishingly similar to the mythology surrounding the Yakshi, or the world tree, as recounted in the Popol Vuh, the creation story of the Maya people of Mesoamerica. According to ancient scripture, the gods placed a Yakshi, or Ceiba tree, at each of the 4 corners of the world, marking the 4 cardinal directions, so they would support the heavens. At the center, they placed a 5th Yakshi to serve as the Axis Mundi, the central conduit for human souls to travel between heaven above, the middle world, the world of the living, and the Xibalba, the underworld. Interestingly, geologist Lance Weaver has speculated on observations he has made regarding the similarities between the depiction of the world tree on the Mesoamerican Izapa Stele 5 and those of the Egyptian tree of life, noting the apparent accompaniment of bird and lion-headed deities on the stele, which are quite similar to those of Thoth or Tehuti, and Sekhmet, Hathor, in her lioness form, in Egyptian carvings.
It also has a being to the waist coming out of the trunk of the tree.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also very similar to the description of Hathor.
There are some depictions of the Ben stone in Egypt as well, with a being extruding out only from the waist up, and holding on to what looks like a doorway. It could be a woman, but these carvings are usually really old, and it's hard to tell. Okay, so returning to the central question regarding the authenticity of the information obtained from Harry Stump, we recognize that the idea of an individual suddenly being possessed by the spirit of an ancient and speaking in a strange language in an unfamiliar voice strains the limits of credulity. Be that as it may, this is far from an isolated example of the phenomenon known as xenoglossy, or speaking in an unacquired language. In The Greeks and the Irrational, Dodds emphasizes, not only were legendary figures like Cassandra, Bacchus, and Sibyl believed to have prophesied in a state of possession, but Plato refers frequently to inspired prophets as a familiar contemporary type. In particular, some sort of private mediumship was practiced in the classical age, and for long afterwards by persons known as belly talkers and later as pythons. I should like to know more about these belly talkers, one of whom, a certain Eurycles, was famous enough to be mentioned both by Aristophanes and by Plato. But our direct information amounts only to this, that they had a second voice inside them which carried on a dialogue with them, predicted the future, and was believed to belong to a daemon. They were certainly not ventriloquists in the modern sense of the term, as is often assumed. A reference in Plutarch seems to imply that the voice of the daemon, presumably a hoarse belly voice, was heard speaking through their lips. The change of voice is mentioned by Plutarch elsewhere as a common feature of enthusiasm. It is no less common in later accounts of possession and in modern spirit mediums.
2 things there. Where they mentioned Python. That's that is derived from Pythia, which is oracle. And enthusiasm. Let me see here if I remember correctly. Enthusiasm is it's not the way we interpret enthusiasm. This was enthusiasm. The etymology of enthusiasm to the Greek was a Greek reference to inspiration or possession by a god.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So if you're enthusiastic, you've been possessed by a god. Okay, so we should stress that in this context, the daemon was considered to be a positive guiding spirit or muse, as opposed to an evil or malevolent spirit, which the Greeks referred to as an alistair. Which is interesting,
Yes.
given Crowley.
Right. That's why he changed his name to Alistair.
Of course. Okay. An excellent 20th century example of xenoglossy is that of an English school teacher named Ivy Carter Beaumont, who in 1927 began producing information via automatic writing and spontaneously entering into trance states. One of the personalities who spoke through her was Telika, who claimed to have lived in the 1400s BC and was sent to Egypt from her home in Babylon to marry the pharaoh. Why always? Are they queens or pharaohs or kings? You know, it's never like I was a peasant and it sucked.
Those just don't want to tell anybody.
Right. They were always Cleopatra.
Just still trying to forget.
Or Napoleon or something. Okay.
Don't remind me of all my past peasant lives. Please.
Okay. So lived in the 1400s, sent to Egypt from her home in Babylon to marry the pharaoh. Talika provided obscure details of her life in Egypt and the reign of Amenhotep IV, and intermittently spoke in an unintelligible language that she claimed was that of ancient Egypt. Ms. Beaumont, publicly known as Rosemary, drew the attention of Dr. F.H. Wood, who conducted a lengthy investigation of the case, writing 3 books on the subject: After 30 Centuries, Ancient Egypt Speaks, and This Egyptian Miracle. For her part, Rosemary expressed doubt in her mediumship. However, through his investigation, Wood made phonetic transcriptions of the strange language spoken by Talika, and he consulted with amateur Egyptologist Howard Holm for his opinion of the veracity of the claims. Based on the accuracy of the information related to the pharaoh and his examination of the language spoken, Holm concluded that the overall substance of Rosemary's communications was authentic. As with all things paranormal, this was an opinion that has been hotly contested to this day. In 1945, at a time when hallucinogenic mushrooms had not yet been identified by botanists in the United States, Puharich combed through what books were available on the subject and was able to identify a mushroom that closely resembled that of Harry's drawing and description, the Amanita muscaria.
I was going to say. White spots.
Yeah. Interestingly, the Amanita muscaria had long been central to Siberian shamanistic tradition, as well as in folklore often in association with fairies, gnomes, and goblins. While searching for more information at a local library, Alice Bouvier learned of a gentleman in New York City who was an ethnomycologist, an expert on the sociological impact of fungi, and who was in the process of writing a book on the subject. She arranged for a meeting with him, and on February 12th, she and Puharich met with the expert R. Gordon Wasson, who was employed as Vice President of Public Relations for J.P. Morgan. What? During the meeting, Wasson revealed that...
That's on my birthday, too.
Oh, yeah, it is. During the meeting, Wasson revealed that in August of 1953, he and his wife, Valentina Wasson, M.D., a Russian-born pediatrician with a practice in New York, traveled to the mountain village of... how do you say this, Marty? Huautla de Jimenez?
Yeah, Huautla de Jimenez. Yep.
In Oaxaca?
Yes.
Mexico?
Very good.
Where they obtained first-hand evidence of a sacred mushroom ceremony observed by the Mazatec Indians that had existed in that remote region of Mesoamerica for hundreds, if not thousands, of years, long before the Spaniards had arrived on the continent. According to Wasson, during the ritual, in order to heal or provide counsel, a curandero consumed mushrooms which allowed his consciousness to separate from his body and operate independently. Wasson stated that at this point in the ritual, the curandero came under the power of the god or gods, and that it was no longer he who spoke, but it was the mushroom himself who spoke. Anything that is uttered while under its influence is believed implicitly to be the utterance of the mushroom itself. Of this revelation, Puharich later wrote, "I knew from my own observations that one could have extraordinary ability to gather intelligence by means of extrasensory perception, provided one had the appropriate talent. Whether such a talent was actually magnified by the use of a mushroom, Mr. Wasson had no way of knowing." Puharich recognized that if that were the case, it was exactly what Army Colonel Norman Elton had requested of him, a mechanism for activating latent extrasensory abilities. As such, Puharich stated, "I did feel that it was my duty to pass on to the military the knowledge that Mr. Wasson had given me, which he did 6 months later in August of 1954. However, he added that he did not know what the Army did with the information." Be that as it may, upon informing his commanding officers at Edgewood Army Chemical Center of Wasson's discovery, Puharich was informed of an ongoing classified psychochemical research program that would require a higher security clearance than he currently possessed for him to be read into. This was MK Ultra Subproject 58, headed by polygraph expert Morse Allen. Resulting from information gleaned from recovered Ahnenerbe files, which revealed the fact that during the war, Nazi doctors were experimenting with psychoactive drugs for interrogation and other purposes, Aberelli states, "Some scientists at the time the Alsos mission report was issued, particularly those with the CIA and Camp Dietrich, felt that the report downplayed Nazi biological warfare advancements in order to give greater play to the Third Reich's nuclear activities." Special Operations Division microbiologist Ben Wilson later said, "If the German microbiologists were so third-rate, why did the country go to such lengths to recruit so many of them to come over here to work after the war?" According to Gerald Jonetz of the review team, "We found out later that the Nazis were more advanced on certain things than anyone thought." Cognizant of the fact that the Russians had also recovered similar Ahnenerbe intelligence, in the summer of 1949, Morse Allen led an overseas mission to learn if the Russians were utilizing interrogance and espionage techniques which involved the use of drugs and hypnosis. In October of 1952, while serving as director of Project Artichoke, Allen learned of an elusive mushroom that was said to grow in Mexico, known as Tionanactol, or God's flesh, which was alleged to possess unique psychoactive properties. In an Artichoke memo in this regard, Allen stated, "The literature shows that witch doctors or divinators used some types of mushrooms to produce confessions, to locate stolen objects, and to predict the future." In 1953, Allen sent an exploratory team headed by Dr. James Moore of the University of Delaware to Mexico in search of the Tionanactol mushroom under the guise of a medical program funded by the Geschichter Fund for Medical Research in Washington, which of course served as a blind for the CIA. Meanwhile, Allen negotiated a contract with a large mushroom grower in Pennsylvania, which was to prepare for mass cultivation for the CIA once a suitable sample was obtained. However, efforts to locate the elusive mushroom proved unsuccessful. I love this.
Why would they
all of
want
this to talk to demons?
Well, it sounds like they were also wanting. There will be multiple references to divination too.
Yeah, I'm being flippant. You can talk to demons by drawing triangles. You don't need any mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. Well, the demons are the ones telling you what the future is going to be.
Right. All right, this is awesome, but we're on a break time here. We're at break.
Yep. We'll be right back.
More to come.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment.
Is it? I don't know.
We got more to do? Okay.
I don't know. We're on the final segment.
Are we going long?
We're going long. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what's going on. I'm just doing a really bad job of producing the show. Everything is coming apart.
Nothing is caught on fire yet.
But you won't even notice over there on your end, listeners.
That's right.
Zero mistakes, I think.
All right. Continuing on here. In her book, Phenomena, author Annie Jacobson wrote, declassified documents indicate that Puharich worked on a research project described as an effort to locate a drug that might enhance ESP. Like the CIA's quest for a truth serum to make captured enemy spies talk, the Army wanted a drug to turn ESP on and off like a light switch. However, there remain major gaps of knowledge regarding Puharich's cooperation or involvement with the CIA in this regard. According to the official account, upon learning of the information relayed to his commanding officers regarding the mushroom cult in Mexico, unbeknownst to him, the CIA chose to circumvent Puharich and approach Wasson directly. Wasson acknowledged his solicitation by the intelligence community, but rejected the offer because he did not want his work to be classified, as he intended to publish all of his findings. He further stated, "I didn't get a penny, not a single grant, from any government source. I'm perfectly sure of that." As forthright as Wasson's statements appear to be, they unfortunately illustrate a considerable amount of naivete on his behalf. Again, according to the official account, as a result of the failure to receive the security clearances required to be read into Subproject 58, Puharich decided to withdraw his proposal for the Army to research into the potential psychoactive properties of the rare mushroom, and instead pursue his investigation independently with the assistance of Wasson. Puharich stated, "I felt that I could pursue my studies with greater ease in Maine than I could within the restrictions of military life." On April 1st, 1955, Puharich retired from the Army and began preparations for long-distance ESP experiments that would be performed between Wasson in Mexico and his laboratory in Maine. On June 9th, 1955, Wasson embarked on a return visit to Huautla, where upon arrival he got to work collecting a box full of the elusive mushrooms, which he then shipped to Puharich for chemical analysis. This was done not only to determine the chemical composition responsible for the psychoactive effects, but also to identify and synthesize an effective antidote. In his book, The Sacred Mushroom, Puharich summarized their long-distance experiments, stating that Wasson was to direct a curandero's attention to the laboratory in Maine in order to find out if he could divinate by extrasensory perception what was going on. In the meantime, we in Maine would set aside certain periods and carefully record situations that we would deliberately set up and that would serve as targets for the alleged ESP of the curandero in Mexico. Irrespective of Puharich's level of involvement, the CIA had not given up its interest in Wasson's research. However, this time their approach would be under the guise of academic research being conducted by Dr. James Moore, which, as mentioned, was actually being funded through Subproject 58 under the direction of Morse Allen. In March 1956, funds were funneled through Moore to finance another of Wasson's expeditions to Mexico. On this occasion, Moore would accompany Wasson, and together more mushroom specimens would be collected. These were then forwarded to the Sandoz Company in Switzerland, which, as listeners will remember, were the developers of LSD, and which by this point was staffed by covert CIA operatives. According to Sidney Gottlieb, this was done for the purpose of developing a completely new chemical agent. According to Gordon Thomas, Allen reported to Gottlieb the effects demonstrated during experiments with this new agent, stating, "After 30 minutes, anxiety became quite definite and was expressed as fear that something evil was going to happen, fear of insanity or of death. At times, subjects had the feeling that they could see blood and bones in their own bodies. They reported many fantasies in which they seemed to be elsewhere, such as taking trips to the moon or living in gorgeous castles. Several reported they felt their minds were being controlled." But were these hallucinations? Back at the Round Table Foundation in Maine, Puharich was conducting his own series of mushroom experiments with Harry Stump and another Dutch psychic named Peter Hurkos, discussed previously, in episode 214, serving as the test subjects. Listeners will recall that Hurkos suffered a brain injury from a fall in 1944, leaving him in a coma for 3 days, from which he emerged having acquired remarkable psychic abilities. For the mushroom experiments, Aldous Huxley, author of The Doors to Perception, who had also studied and experimented with the use of mushrooms in shamanistic tradition, served as an observer. In his laboratory notes, Puharich recorded that Stump was subjected to multiple experiments to test the mushroom's effects on his natural psychic abilities. Data from the experiments was statistically quantified, and the results indicated a significant improvement with a success rate of 1,000,000 to 1 above chance. He added that Stump appeared to exhibit similar qualities to that of Eileen Garrett's traveling clairvoyance, and he seemed to be able, in his mind, to see through walls and to distant scenes and places. One evening, in July 1956, while returning to his room at the Round Table Foundation, Peter Hurkos, who was skeptical of such things, alleged to have encountered a poltergeist. He stated, As it went by me, I could feel a cold breeze on my face. I was so frightened, I spilled the coffee all over the tray." The next morning, Puharich received word that Alice Bouvier had passed away in her sleep that evening. Puharich was plunged into a state of depression, mixed with bouts of rage and paranoia. However, despite the loss of its official benefactor, the Round Table Foundation somehow continued to thrive, employing more than a dozen scientists and psychics. Meanwhile, the CIA's efforts to exploit Wasson's research were severely hindered when, on May 13, 1957, he published a lengthy cover story in Life magazine titled "Seeking the Magic Mushroom," which discussed his 30 years of research on the subject and provided details of his expeditions to Mexico. In the article, he wrote, "In ancient Greece and Rome, there was a belief that certain kinds of mushrooms were procreated by the lightning bolt. We made the further discovery that this particular myth, for which no support exists in natural science, is still believed among many widely scattered peoples: the Arabs of the desert, the peoples of India, Persia, and the Pamirs, the Tibetans and the Chinese, the Filipinos, and the Maoris of New Zealand, and even among the Zapotecs of Mexico. All of our evidence taken together led us many years ago to hazard a bold surmise. Was it not probable that long ago, long before the beginnings of written history, our ancestors had worshipped a divine mushroom?" In the article, Wasson also wrote that while discussing the subject with Spanish-speaking Indians in Central America, he asked about the effect of the mushrooms, and their response often was this: "They carry you there where God is," an answer that we have received on several occasions from Indians in different cultural areas. We will add that
he skipped the Spanish part.
Of course I did. You want to say it?
Le llevan a donde Dios está.
Okay. They carry you there where God is. So we will add that this response mirrors exactly that said of Soma in the Rig Veda. Wasson further expressed his belief that at all times there have been rare souls, the mystics and certain poets, who have had access without the aid of drugs to the visionary world for which the mushrooms hold the key. William Blake possessed the secret. He who does not imagine in stronger and better light than his perishing mortal eye can see does not imagine at all. William Blake was born in London in 1757, and although not recognized as such in life, would posthumously be remembered as a luminary, mystically inspired painter, engraver, literary author, and poet, who has been credited as far and away the greatest artist Britain has ever produced. He is best known for his beautiful yet equally haunting biblical illustrations. Oh, he's the one that did God with the Compass, huh?
Yeah, it was on the... I was blown away when I wrote this, and then that same day that I wrote it, you published a new Cosmographia, and that image was on.
There you go. Yeah, it's the architect.
Like, what a
with the compass.
synchronicity.
That's one of Randall's favorite images, I think.
Yeah.
He's shown it quite a few times.
One day, while at the age of 4, William screamed, believing to have witnessed the face of God in a window in his home. His parents soon realized that young William was more sensitive than his older siblings, so they chose to have him homeschooled. As he grew older, not being confined to a classroom afforded him the freedom to explore the streets of London and the surrounding countryside. According to his first biographer, Alexander Gilchrist, one summer morning when William was between the ages of 8 and 10 while strolling through Peckham Rye, the boy looks up and sees a tree filled with angels, bright angelic wings bespangling through every bough like stars. Upon returning home, he casually informed his parents of the encounter, which elicited an angry response and beating from his father. It was not until this point that William realized that such visions were not normal, and that no matter how common they might seem to him, others would not believe what he experienced. Gilchrist further emphasized this point, writing, "Another time, one summer morn, he sees the haymakers at work, and amid them angelic figures walking. If these traits of childish years be remembered, they will help to elucidate the visits from the spiritual world of later years, in which the grown man believed as unaffectedly as ever had the boy of 10. As noted, William continued to experience similar apparitions his entire life and even claimed to commune with the archangels who instructed and encouraged his works. On the other hand, he also alleged to have experienced a vision of Satan. William Blake died in relative poverty in 1827, but on his deathbed just before his passing, it was reported that he burst out singing of the things he saw in heaven. For nearly 2 centuries following his death, scholars of art and poetry have rationalized William Blake's visions as that of either a madman or the unrecognized expression of a creative genius. Few, however, have considered the pervasive, ineffable nature of similar historical accounts. Expounding on the ineffability of such experiences, in 1901, the American philosopher William James wrote that the subject of it immediately says that it defies expression, that no adequate report of its contents can be given in words. It follows from this that its quality must be directly experienced. It cannot be imparted or transferred to others. In this peculiarity, mystical states are more like states of feeling than like states of intellect. No one can make clear to another who has never had a certain feeling in what the quality or worth of it consists. One must have musical ears to know the value of a symphony. One must have been in love oneself to understand a lover's state of mind. Lacking the heart or ear, we cannot interpret the musician or the lover justly, and are even likely to consider him weak-minded or absurd. The mystic finds that most of us accord to his experiences an equally incompetent treatment." I really like that.
Yeah.
American neurosurgeon Eben Alexander stated it another way regarding the ineffable nature of his experience while in a coma in 2008. "It is rather like being a chimpanzee, becoming a human for a single day to experience all of the wonders of human knowledge, and then returning to one's chimp friends and trying to tell them what it was like knowing several different Romance languages, the calculus, and the immense scale of the universe." In the Life magazine article, Gordon Wasson goes on to postulate that although William Blake may have had access to visions of a greater reality, through his research and experiences in Mexico, he could testify that the mushrooms make those visions accessible to a much larger number of individuals. He further states, "The visions that we saw must have come from within us, obviously, but they did not recall anything that we had seen with our own eyes. Somewhere within us there must lie a repository where these visions sleep until they are called forth. Are the visions a subconscious transmutation of things read and seen and imagined, so transmuted that when they are conjured forth from the depths we no longer recognize them? Or do the mushrooms stir greater depths still, depths that are truly the unknown?"
I think that's a great observation.
Yeah.
Now, are you saying that the visions that they see under the influence are not anything experienced in normal life?
Yeah.
So he's questioning, well, so where are these images coming from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the implication is that it's connecting us to some greater reality. That's the idea. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Shortly after the Life article, Wasson went on to publish several additional articles on the subject, as well as his first of several books titled Mushrooms, Russia, and History. The cat was out of the bag. Wasson began writing prolifically on the subject, and in doing so, he offered some interesting conclusions based on his many decades of investigation. In Flesh of the Gods, he wrote, "Many students of the customs and folklore of the forest belt of Siberia have remarked on the reverence shown everywhere for the Siberian birch, which is preeminently the tree of the shaman. He builds his tent around the bole of a birch, and in trance, he climbs up the trunk to go to his travels to the land of departed spirits. There where the tree grows is the navel of the earth, the axis mundi, the cosmic tree, the pillar of the world. What is this but the mainstay of the sky that we find in the Rig Veda? The imagery is rich in synonyms and doublets. The pool of heavenly yellow liquor is often guarded by the chthonic spirit, a serpent. And surmounting the tree, we hear of a spectacular bird capable of soaring to the heights where the gods meet in conclave. This substance is not merely an invigorating inebriant comparable to alcohol. We are dealing with the enthusiasm of the poet in the original and now obsolete sense of that word, divine possession, poetic frenzy, supernatural inspiration. The engine behind the myth and ritual of the Rig Veda is this enthusiasm. If I am right, here is where we arrived. This is the secret of our discovery. We have identified a plant understandably considered as miraculous by the people of long ago, and in so doing we have swung open the portals to ecstasy. I will point out that in the Rig Veda, there is no mention of the roots, the leaves, the blossoms, the seed, or the fruit of Soma. In fact, the Rig Veda says expressly that Soma was born without seed. The gods laid the somic germ. The only plants that fill these requirements are mushrooms. Soma, I suggest, was the mushroom known in the English-speaking world as the fly agaric Amanita muscaria. The words used for the fly agaric in the various tribes, the associated meanings of those words and their etymologies, the personification of the fly agaric as little men, the petroglyphs dating from long ago, all of these aspects of the fly agaric cult deserve attention. To restate this in more direct terms, Wasson recognized the historical connection between the concept of the tree of life and communion with some form of ethereal intelligence in the guise of little men, such as fairies, gnomes, goblins, etc. He also recognized the propensity for mushrooms such as the Amanita muscaria to grow in the shade of trees such as the birch. He followed this lead for decades until he had reached the conclusion that the divine fruit of this mushroom was Soma, which provided a bridge of communication with the other world. Although we were unable to locate any reference to this in any of Wasson's work, we inadvertently stumbled upon a curiosity while on our recent trip to Egypt that may lend support to his observation and conclusions. While visiting Marty is now speaking in the first person here. So, while visiting the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, I spent hours surveying all of the carvings found both inside and outside the enormous site. In the courtyard in front of the temple, there are a vast number of random remnants placed in multiple rows. As I walked up and down these rows, one piece stood out and drew my attention. Most listeners are aware that Egyptian artists typically rendered people and objects in their most descriptive and recognizable angle, which was often in profile. However, much less common are those depicted front-facing, such as the way Hathor is depicted throughout the temple, to illustrate her characteristic cow ears. So seeing another front-facing individual immediately gave me the impression of something not only unusual, but also seemed to convey a sense of importance. I must admit that at the time I was unfamiliar with the character and what it represented, but it was strikingly different in appearance from that of any typical Egyptian pharaoh, person, or their more commonly known deities. This appeared to be a life-sized carving of a bearded, large-eared dwarf or gnome wearing some form of headdress and a triangular symbol of a lioness head on his chest. I soon learned that this was Bes, the protector of children and pregnant women. It was said that Bes was often seen in children's bedrooms, and it was believed that when a baby spontaneously laughed or smiled, it was because Bes was present and entertaining them. Bes was sometimes depicted with wings and was also said to carry a loud musical instrument, which he used to banish demonic spirits. In an inscription, Bess was said to have come from a divine land, and figurines of his likeness have been dated to the pre-dynastic period. Bess was also said to be closely associated with Hathor, the nurturing mother goddess. This association was verified when we later visited the temple of Hathor at Philae, where I found many more front-facing depictions of Bess throughout the temple. So here again, it would appear that we see a motif of the life-giving tree in the form of Hathor, the lady of the sycamore, and the mushroom in the form of Bess, the little man. As a side note, I feel compelled to point out the curious similarity of the Hathor-Bess connection with that of the modern-day circumstances surrounding Christopher Bledsoe's encounters with the lady, as discussed near the end of episode 214. As listeners will recall, Bledsoe first encountered 3 small beings who claimed to work for creation, adorned with a triangular emblem on their chest, shortly before the lady appeared to him, identifying herself as Hathor and referring to the small beings as her children. As Wasson suggested, in the laboratories of the Round Table Foundation, serious attention was in fact being given to the Amanita muscaria. On August 23, 1957, in a semi-conscious state, while under the influence of the mushroom, Peter Hurkos had a vision that he described as a miracle in the sky. When pressed for more information, he was unable to discern the nature of the object. Puharich asked if it was a comet or any other form of natural phenomenon. Hurkos flatly responded, no. He continued, there is going to be a miracle in the sky. It is coming. I cannot tell you precisely what it is, except that I see it as an earth ball. It is in the sky, and everybody in the whole world can see it. According to Annie Jacobson, the FBI files reveal that 4 days later, on August 27, 1957, Puharich was visited by Dr. Harvey E. Savely, director of the U.S. Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and William J. Fry, head of biophysics research at the Army Laboratory at the University of Illinois. There are clear indications that this was not a casual visit, as these individuals remained on site at Puharich's laboratory for 3 days. 5 days later, on October 4th, 1957, the world was stunned by headlines that the Soviet Union had successfully placed Sputnik 1, mankind's first artificial satellite, into orbit around the Earth. Within days, the research activities at the Round Table Foundation in Maine ceased, and Puharich moved to Carmel Valley, California, where he received full-time employment by the U.S. Army as a consultant on mushroom toxicology at the Fort Ord Station Hospital Laboratory in Monterey.
Point out something there. Notice that those guys from the Air Force were there for 3 days.
Yeah.
Immediately after Hurkos made this prediction about this miracle in the sky.
Yeah.
So it almost gives the impression that they were waiting to see if something was going to happen. And then shortly after they left, and it's entirely possible that they knew what it was. In other words, intelligence most likely knew that the Russians were working on a satellite program. Right?
Yeah.
So it's possible that was their interest. And the idea that somebody knew this, was predicting this, might have really gotten their attention. And the other, I think, interesting aspect of this, because this plays to what we just spoke of, is this ineffability of describing things that are outside of your cognitive framework. Like Hurkos was seeing something, but he couldn't describe it. He said it was a miracle in the sky, and it was an earth ball, but it was the concept of a satellite was entirely didn't exist, right? So he didn't have words to describe it.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting given what we just read about the ineffability of these type of experiences, where you're taken places and shown things that we don't have terms to really adequately describe.
Yeah, I thought of 2 things with that earth ball description. Like, one, he could be saying in a strange way that it is a ball that came from Earth. The other possibility that I thought of, and I kind of thought of this because of what happens with doorknobbing, right? Where you get fascinated by some object because you're really close to it. If he, like visually, if he's looking at Sputnik in the sky, but he's close to it and it's a reflective sphere, he may have seen the reflection of Earth in its surface.
Yeah.
So it looks
that's
like a
good
giant,
point.
like, there's this huge silver ball and then Earth is like in it somehow.
An Earth ball.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's interesting that he does that, and then it goes. These guys visit, and then of course Puharich shuts his lab down and moves.
Right. Immediately after,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, he gets transferred over to California and starts working on another program.
Yeah. Well, is it another
Or a
program, or is it just the
continuation,
same
right.
thing? And he's a consultant on mushroom toxicology. That's just okay. So by 1960, Puharich had purchased a new spacious patio home in the upscale community of Carmel Meadow. His wife at the time later wrote that when she inquired about how he had been able to afford the home, his response that it was none of her business. Despite his wife's pregnancy, in June of 1960, Puharich went on an expedition to Oaxaca, Mexico, sponsored by the Army Chemical Corps. During this expedition, Puharich participated in the sacred mushroom rite. This extended trip placed a tremendous strain on his marriage, but be that as it may, 1 month after his return, he embarked on another 14-man scientific expedition to, how do you say this one? Huaquila?
I wasn't following.
Okay.
So.
Somewhere in Mexico.
Well, yeah. Huaquila Mexico sounds right.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
This time sponsored by the Department of Pharmacology of the University of Washington, which is now known to have conducted LSD experiments for the U.S. Army. Strangely, this second expedition included a documentary film crew that covered the journey, including the locating of a sacred mushroom by a brujo, a Mexican witch doctor, and subsequent ESP tests. This footage was included in an episode of the ABC television documentary series One Step Beyond. Upon his return in December 1960, Puharich and his team began a series of trials of a mushroom extract. These trials involved 29 subjects who were determined to be non-psychic and included 3 Los Angeles area journalists considered skeptical of psychic abilities. 3,360 trials were conducted, and the results of these suggested a considerable statistical improvement above chance under the influence of the mushroom extract. So the question now was, how could this ability be leveraged for strategic military and intelligence advantage? By identifying patterns of consistency in ancient shamanic traditions in Siberia, Asia, and Mesoamerica, Gordon Wasson was able to develop a grand unified theory of contact with the otherworld through the medium of the mushroom. Through applied science, Andrea Puharich identified the ability to enhance one's ability to access information potentially obtained from other worlds aided by that mushroom. In this regard, author Peter First of the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology states, "Perhaps the discovery that certain substances found in nature help man to move beyond his everyday experiences to other worlds, and the institutionalizing of these personal, ecstatic experiences into an ideological and ritual framework accepted by the group as a whole goes back almost to the beginnings of human culture. The striking similarities between the basic premises and motifs of shamanism the world over suggest great antiquity as well as the universality of the creative unconscious of the human psyche. Wherever shamanism is still encountered today, whether in Asia, Australia, Africa, or North or South America, the shaman functions fundamentally in much the same way and with similar techniques as guardian of the psychic and ecological equilibrium of his group and its members, as intermediary between the seen and unseen worlds, as master of spirits, as supernatural cure, etc., and he seeks to ensure the benevolence of ancestor spirits and deities. As we shall learn, evidence suggests that the CIA and Department of Defense had other, less altruistic objectives, and perhaps they were not the only hounds in the hunt. But that is a chapter for another day. Until next time. And as always, again, we end with a quote. Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because, in the last analysis, we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. Max Planck. Fantastic.
That was a really eloquent way of saying, we'll get to that later.
I work on creative ways of saying that.
No, that's good stuff, man.
Yeah, I am liking the inclusion of the mushroom stuff in this. So now we're trying to talk about UFOs, and we also have to talk about taking drugs and doing mushrooms and shamanism and drawing triangles in the desert.
Well, I want you to, or you and listeners, to consider something now. As you remember in the last episode, well, first, I guess I'll point out that at approximately the same time that Paharik became aware of Subproject 58, Francis Swan and Dorothy Martin were receiving psychic communications. If they were in fact being targeted by the CIA for involuntary experimentation, what was the objective? Was it simply to manipulate their perception? Or were they testing the effects of this drug on random individuals' psychic abilities?
Yeah, that's what I would think of first. Is it a test?
Right.
They're trying out their abilities to mess with other people.
Right. In other words, from the interpretation we could draw from part 2, they were being drugged to and possibly being deceived, or they were the victims of a psyop to lead them to believe that they were communicating with aliens or something, right?
Yeah, can you?
But now,
refresh the story. Who are the
Yeah,
Right,
I don't remember
right.
these people.
Yeah.
Francis Swan was the individual. These are both women that were receiving. Initially, they were receiving communications via automatic writing, and then
Is
they
this
were
the one that was
receiving
like
messages. Apocalyptic. There was going to be a
UFO
mass
landing
landing,
on the
and
air-
right. They
yeah,
both
yeah, yeah.
effectively the same story. They were both more or less giving the same story. But in Francis Swan's case, she actually went to the Pentagon and did a presentation and started speaking the xenoglossy. She started speaking in a different voice and answering questions that allegedly were things that there was no way she could know,
Yeah.
but she was giving the correct answers to. And then one of the individuals there, I guess they asked her to, if this is true, if what you're saying is true, why don't you make a UFO appear?
Oh, yeah.
And they go to the window and there's a freaking UFO out there. and at that exact same time, the radar systems at the airport went down and did not capture anything. So again, was it a psyop, or were they really testing this ability? In other words, let's say she was drugged, right? Let's assume, given the information that we discussed in part 2, relating, we know that they were making these trips there frequently, and the proximity to the areas that they discussed that Mulholland said were the targeted areas, and the women, or what did he call them, the girls that he was making references to. It definitely gives the impression that these individuals were targeted, right? Or you could draw that from the statements. And again, given the information we discussed in that episode, it made it seem as though they were the victims of a psyop. But now, given this new information that we know Subproject 58 was working on related to these mushrooms, it's possible, this is pure speculation, that maybe they were being drugged, but they were being drugged for the purpose of testing to see whether this, or maybe these women really were psychic, and now they're giving
Yeah.
them this drug to see if it's enhancing that to be
Yeah.
able to draw more information from them. Again, this is why I said I had to plan the episodes
Yeah,
out.
Yeah, I see. Like, so you mean they're trying to see if they can enhance it with these,
Right.
yeah,
In other
with these
words,
drugs.
were they really having the experiences or not? After the last episode, we go, no, it was a psyop. Now we go, well, maybe they were experiencing this. It was a psyop, and they were experiencing it both.
And it seems like I'm going to draw this from across the entire thing we just went through for this episode, but it's the implication that this is okay, that the mushroom is the Sefer Reziel, whatever it was called, the sapphire book that was given to Adam. In other words, that story is basically saying God has, or some higher entity has provided mankind with a way to access information about creation, right? All this secret stuff. The implication that it wasn't given to the angels is interesting, right? Like, is that added because of religious aspects of it, or is it just basically saying, is there? In other words, the idea is that there are entities in the spirit realm who do not have access to something like a mushroom that gives them all this knowledge about creation from the higher planes of creation itself, right? If God is like the force of creation, then it is provided in the material realm a way for humans to access this information. And what you're kind of implying here is that at some point, like some Western powers, including the U.S., have rediscovered this thing and now are trying to use it for like espionage purposes. Right? Is that the idea? And so this is a gift from a higher power that is now being used for bad things.
Yes, exactly.
And this may be causing this may have enormous repercussions throughout our civilization.
Well, the only thing I would change in that statement is bad things, because that's a relative term. And from their perspective, my guess is that they're doing this for national security.
Right. Bad things.
Allegedly.
Bad things relative to what the tool was designed for.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And, and that withholding of this knowledge from the angels, I don't know if I put that interpretation. I don't even remember the verbiage that I used in this, but there are statements that say, like, what is man that you are giving him this attention?
Yeah.
Like there's almost like there's jealousy there that, why are you giving man special treatment? And there's resentment on the part of certain factions. In speculating on this, this concept of that there is some other non-human intelligence that is intervening in mankind's, progress is and I've suggested that it would appear that there is at least two separate factions, and we're kind of stuck in the middle of this.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing Bramley and, Fort effectively were coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
I don't know if they went so far as to suggest that there were multiple factions involved, but if there are two factions, this could possibly be giving some explanation for why there is a conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a section you put in here where basically the God or the Lord, which is, I guess that's different, gets upset and says, "From the day I created the angels, you have all been an opponent of the humans. In the beginning, when I wanted to create Adam the first, all of you made their prosecution before me, and you all said to me, 'What is man, that you are mindful of him?'" So there's an implication there that from the beginning, there's a bunch of angels who have been pissed off, right? That God was even going to do this, or the Lord, whatever.
I think it's important when you look at this, just to be completely um, objective, non-secular, I guess you could say. Um, Imagine this as, because again, there are multiple heavens, and
Yeah.
within each, vast number of different types of angels of different forms.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you could view that as saying, well, maybe there are multiple civilizations. And so we can't necessarily lump them all together as one thing, but they're, I guess, in a sense, they're factions within this one thing. You know what I mean? It just, we're using angel as a placeholder for what could be multiple different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah, and in some instances, they seem to, like, they all have the specific roles. Like, the idea is given, like, this one runs this thing, this, like, the Sandalphon one is like, he's the ruler of the material realm, right?
Right.
He's in control. That's his job. His charge is all of the material realm, which is hilarious that he's, like, so terrifying to material beings, right? He's
And also, it's also interesting that the Sefer Raziel gave information on how to navigate the physical realm,
yeah.
physical existence.
Yeah, and how to control all of these beings or entities or whatever that, the demons and the idea is that it allows you to do, to command them, basically.
And by extension, that means that effectively implies the existence of a non-physical.
Yeah, it does. Yes. All right, man.
Well, I know why the angels didn't want us around and the demons.
Why
We rock too hard.
They have not been able to win a rock-off with a human in recorded history. All right, man. Thank you so much. It's always good. A lot to think about. So is the next one part 4 of Spookiest Story, or are we okay? It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we still got a long way to go. We're
Okay.
I'm inching along on this. Like I said, it's all planned out. I know where this is headed, and I know what each. Sometimes I overestimate what all information I can squeeze into an episode. Like this one, I thought I was going to get further. Like we're just about 1960. We touched a little bit on things that it's chronologically, it's very difficult to
Yeah.
distill some parts down that to a completely chronological, scale, but we're just kind of getting into the starting of what happens in the 60s.
Right.
Maybe
That'll
we
be
can,
more the topic of the next episode.
We can finish the spookiest story never told on Halloween.
Oh, that would be great.
Challenge? But we're not talking about that kind of spooky.
Challenge.
There's a lot of spooks in this spooky story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that why it's the spookiest story?
I
So
think
full of
so.
spooks.
Lots of spooks. That is exactly what I
Yeah.
implied. Although there will be
great.
some spooky stuff in this.
It is.
It's spooky.
It's spooky. Even without any of the spooks. This is weird stuff.
To me, the Solomon quote is spooky.
Yeah.
It's ominous,
Yeah. There's plenty of ominous stuff in here. I mean, but yeah, I think that the idea of like some kind of enlightenment tool being used for, I mean, I guess it could have been being used for that for forever too. Like, who's to say that shamans weren't spying on each other and helping their people in war against somebody else,
Yeah.
But then that's how you end up with the bad ones. This is dark magic, right? They have legends about this also.
Yeah, I think that's sort of an extension of Kyle's comment earlier that I thought that was a great observation that nuts and bolts versus a non-physical application. Like, in other words, effectively the shaman is achieving an objective that we otherwise use technology to achieve.
Yeah. Yep.
Our normal evolutionary process is using technology to address certain challenges that the shaman is doing in a non-physical
Right.
way.
But like what you were saying though, Russ, is you use that tool in a bad way. That's how you open the door and let the demons in.
Right. That's how you end up being like a skinwalker or whatever. Like
Yeah.
the shamans that become dark magic,
Yeah.
right? Bad medicine.
I mean, that's an old.
So it's like our government's
that's an
full
old
of
superstition,
skinwalkers.
you know. That it's like you don't mess with it because you
Yeah.
open the door and you never know what's going to come through that door.
Divination, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is it reversible? Like the other idea is like, are there certain, if we go with the idea that this psychic stuff is the ESP things, the magical things are possible. Is it possible that doing too much of the dark magic stuff it like damages you irreversibly, right? You can't be cured from it. You can't come back from it. It's a permanent condition. Sort of like radiation. It's cumulative, and the damage is permanent. It can't be undone.
Right. And that's sort of like the quote at the end. That's effectively what this scholar is saying. He's saying that the shaman serves as the intermediary between the seen and unseen worlds, as the master of spirits, as a supernatural cure, and he seeks to ensure the benevolence of ancient spirits and deities.
Yeah.
Well, it's like we were talking about the other day. It's like that part of your spirit or whatever, like in the afterlife, is just discarded,
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah.
So if the material of this other world is consciousness in a way, right? And it's like they're accumulating
Yeah.
knowledge here of the material world, and then if something goes awry and like you're saying, you damage, like somebody does damage to themselves irreversibly, then that bit of consciousness is just destroyed.
Yeah. It would not be like reabsorbed into the oversoul or whatever, the higher being.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want it. It's dark. It's corrupted.
Yeah.
Or you're trapped on the hamster wheel
Yeah.
of physical existence. Circles until you get it right.
Yeah.
The old
Maybe
wheel of
those-
fortune.
Yeah, maybe those errors are, bad judgment are not irreversible. Maybe they're irreversible for a particular
Like on a grander scale, you mean?
right. Yes, mhm.
They're severed off and they're stuck here and they become like poltergeists or something.
It's like hitting the reset button. Now you got to put another quarter in the machine, play another game.
Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, that's always fantastic.
Are we going to do a Patreon segment?
Yeah. Let's do
All
it.
right. We failed to do
I got
that.
one thing I want to show here, just because, and I don't want to dox a member of the Discord. I'll just say I'll use his name, but nobody's going to know who he is in the Discord. But a good listener of the podcast did something. He pays attention, and you've heard me make reference to this many times as a joke, but he actually did something that I thought was super freaking cool. So I just got to show it. You see that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, old Jiminy Cricket in the
monster
in the
truck.
monster truck, dude. Fantastic.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that's really cool.
That is awesome.
That's really great.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That was so cool.
All right. Well, I think
No more.
yeah, we're done. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
All right.